on Great Place to Work to say a few words. Over to you, Preeti.
Hi, thank you, Smriti. A very good evening and a very, very warm welcome to all our delegates across Asia. As Smriti mentioned, it is our pleasure to welcome delegates not just from India, but we have people today from Singapore, from Sri Lanka, Philippines, and from UAE. And I know that for Singapore, it's a little late in the evening. So thank you so much. These series have been curated based on the inputs that we got from the CXOs of the best workplaces and were crafted specifically keeping in mind the topics that were relevant for all of us during the current times. Our objectives during these meetings have been to learn from each other and also learn from global experts, and that is how we have been able to out and bring to you what you had requested us to. This topic, of course, was voted for by many organizations, and it is something which is a must do in the current scenario. All our teams are working remotely. We have to pivot our businesses. We have to look at what do we need to do differently. This is the first month where the lockdown just started and things are even now, but I think initially it was all about that acceptance that yes, this is a pandemic, it is here to stay, impact our businesses differently though, of course, based on our context. But now I think it is more and more about each of us to see that how do we really work across during this scenario? How do we co-create? How do we digitally collaborate if that is not what we have been used to in the past? And that's where we thought that an expert like David would be the perfect choice this evening. We are thankful for our partner right selection who enable us to bring these global leaders to you. And today, as Smriti said, we have David Noor with us, based out of Atlanta. So good morning, David, to you, and thanks for starting your day with our members. I'm going to do a very short introduction for David to take you through his story. I had the fortune of meeting him when he was in India for one of the leading clients, working with them over 2 days with the leadership team for their annual strategy. And that is when we said that we must bring him at some point for one of the great plays. Of course, at that time, we did not think that it would be digital, but really glad to have him here. He is known to be, a very acclaimed leader in the space of strategic relationships for profitable growth, sustained innovation, and lasting change. He works with teams globally across many Fortune 500. He's a leadership board advisor, he's a researcher, and of course a best-selling author. His best-selling books have been Relationship Economics and Co-Create, and he's writing one very interesting one called Curve Benders, which would be out. He's also among the Marshall's Goldsmith coaches, the top 100 coaches that have been ordered globally by Marshall Goldsmith. Some of you have had the opportunity of interacting with Marshall during our last CX. And Noor will take us through a very interesting work that he has done. In fact, if I look at the last 2 months since the pandemic started, his team has done some incredible work, and we've of course been talking to him over the last few days, and I was very impressed with it. So really looking forward. I also personally think he has got this right from a very young age. He immigrated from Iran to US as a teenager with just about $100 with him, and and that is something that he shared with us. So from there on, I think he has been a self-made leader, and I will, without much ado, welcome Noor and let him take us through, and then of course our session designed specifically for you. Thank you, Noor.
Priti,
David,
thank you. I want to also thank Gautam and the team at Right Selection for having me. It's delighted to be with you. I think most of our audience realize that beyond the initial shock of this global pandemic, forward-thinking leaders that I'm speaking with are thinking about use this COVID-19 as an impetus to rethink, reimagine, if not reinvent their business and their business models.
Sure.
So I'm elated to be with you. I look forward to sharing some great ideas. I want to reiterate the comment earlier and welcome you to submit your questions in the question section of your GoToWebinar, and I'll pause periodically to make sure we address those. We also have made sufficient time towards the end. If you have questions, please submit those and we'll go ahead and get started. So again, thanks for me. Thanks for making the time. Very quickly about my background. As Priti was kind enough to mention, I'm an advisor. I'm a researcher. I'm an adjunct faculty at a couple universities, and I do a great deal of executive coaching. My passion and my work for the last 2 decades have been around this idea of strategic business relationships. As you can imagine, appreciate, they don't make sense by themselves, right? Nobody builds relationships because they're bored. We build relationships because in an application of some sort of outcome. So the 3 outcomes that I focus on is really how do you nurture an environment of inquiry and experimentation. Most organizations, most mature organizations and mature industries are very strong execution engines, if you will. It becomes easy to become potentially complacent when things are going well. I've always said a really strong economy hides a lot of organizational flaws, if not some leadership shortcomings. So when you create an environment that really rewards inquiry and experimentation and asking questions and challenging the status quo, not just defending it, you tend to come up with really innovative ways of doing things. Encouraging that culture of innovation with capabilities, with competencies, with tools and processes to really think and lead differently is a big part of our work. And then all of that has got to lead to some sort of an outcome. And the outcome from all this should be profitable growth. I've never believed in growth at any expense, at any cost. I believe in profitable growth. I believe in prudent growth. So growth is a big driver of our work. I've also never seen an organization cut its way to growth. So we're passionate about continue to invest, even in times like this, continue to invest in your talent, in your business model, in really opportunities to think differently about where we're going, how we're going to get there. As Priti was kind enough to mention, I've been blessed to write 10 books, and I'm now writing book number, which is called Curve Benders, and it will be out this fall. So a fun fact, I've done this in the past, a lot of my contemporaries do this. We all write a book and then we come out and talk about it. I actually learn as much, if not more, about my books after they come out. So think about it a second. After you publish a book, people will read it and they'll bring their perspective and their lens and their point of view and their experiences and examples, and they challenge some of your assumptions and they challenge some of your ideas. And through that discussion, you create richer content. So with Curve Benders, I said, I've been researching this for 4 years. We've got a great deal of data, but instead of talking about it after it comes out, I said, why don't I get out and talk to people and share ideas? And I've been doing keynotes and virtual sessions. And with the pandemic, we're actually building a full-blown video here in my home because I think it might be a while for us to get physically back together again. But really getting out and talking about the ideas, it's amazing how much richer it's becoming. I think the book that will come out this fall is going to be considerably stronger because I went out and started talking about it, and you'll see some of those ideas today. I have a young family. I have 2 teenagers. One is just finishing high school, and she'll be attending Georgia Tech this fall. And I'm an old Eagle Scout, so scouting and outdoors is real big in our family. motorcycles across the country. I've ridden in Italy. I'm going to Argentina next January. So I love riding bikes long distance. So I want to make this interactive. I want to make sure we engage. So if you could do me a favor and go ahead and take out your smartphones. And if you could go to the menti.com, it's a lot more fun if you play along, and just open up a browser and menti.com. And on top of the page, you'll see a code. If you look at your screen, you see a code 5759695. Go ahead and enter that code. So menti.com, and go ahead and enter that code. And my first question is, how young are you? So just type in a number for me and we'll all see it come up. So again, great deal more fun if you play along. So there we go, perfect. So menti.com, and top of the page you're looking at is a code 759695. And throughout this session, I'm gonna handful of questions. Perfect, look at that. So I see as young as, I love that, 31, and as young as, let's see, 52 and 49. So good with 54, there we go, good range. Here's what I want you to think about. Then thank you for jumping in, that's great. We're getting a lot of good responses. In a lot of my client conversations, millennials are the ones that unfortunately are struggling with this the most, because they've never anything like this. Most of us haven't, but if you've been in the business for a while, we went 2001, the gas shortage in the US in the 70s, right? The stock crash in the 80s, and 2001, internet bubble, 2008 recession, and then of course in the US, 2001 terrorist attacks, and we've gone through economic up and downs. But if you've never been through this, pay cuts and furloughs and layoffs, those kinds of things are going to be really challenging. So it's really important to help nurture their grit, their resilience, their understanding of not just what's happening, but why, and how to get stronger because of this, right? So my teenagers, right, they've found jobs on websites that are looking for tutors. They found work online, right, to help others. And it's not just about economic benefit, it's also about finding opportunities to help and engage others, right? So we're going to talk about professional responsibilities with our personal obligations. And I think your experience, your lens in which you look at this current time, one. Let's go ahead and go to the next question. What city are you joining us from? Are you joining us from? Just type the city, just the city name. And again, that will also show up. There we go. Atlanta, Mumbai, Colombo, Bangalore. There we go. Perfect. Pune. I've got, let's see, Delhi. Nice. Winchester. Beautiful. Dubai. Right? Fantastic. So just enter what city you're joining us from, and this will give us a good chance to see where the audience is from. So Gautam from Right Selection and I were talking. Marshall Goldsmith, who many of you know, and as of I want to say 3 weeks to a month ago, when this global pandemic off, held daily Zoom meetings. And what's fascinating is the global footprint, and it's fascinating to hear from Fabricio, Antonio in Madrid, and you hear from friends in UK and friends in Oman, Jordan, and just very different parts of the world bring very different lenses and perspectives. So the reason city's important is we often ourselves with people who think a lot like us. And we often talk about diversity in terms of diversity of gender or ethnic. I don't think we talk enough about diversity of thought. So I think one of the things that would be really helpful to you, not just in this current time, but really overall, is getting more diverse thought around an idea, around a perspective, right? So we'll talk more about that in a second. So thank you for those who jumped in. Looks like a lot of good friends from India. Good, glad to have you. One final question, your role. Your role, is it people, talent, HR, sales, marketing, revenue, finance, legal, IT, manufacturing, engineering, digital innovation transformation, or you're a P&L executive. So just let us know. So it looks like a lot of people, talent, HR, great. There's some few sales, love that. Great mix, right? And I'm thinking of your primary role. So you might be doing some of those other things, but your primary role or realm responsibility. So let's look at, love that, people, talent, HR. How critical is your role these days, right? So we'll talk a lot about that. Look at that, great turnout, good mix of some sales folks, finance and IT and legal, some manufacturing, some engineering, some innovation, several P&L executives. That's great. So you can put that away now. Stop checking email. It's late on Friday in India. So, but we'll come back to Mentee. So we'll definitely come back to Mentee, and I want to keep asking a couple questions. So in terms of the agenda today, I want to talk about this idea of Agile. I've had 62 with senior executives in the last really month to about 5 weeks, and there's some dynamics that I want to talk about. Agile Alignment is one of those. I'm going to talk a lot about digital collaboration. As Preeti mentioned, I travel extensively. I was on the road 208 days last year globally, and as of month and a half ago, cut down like most people. So if your business or business model is predicated by physical proximity, how will you now engage? How will you influence? How will you build and nurture those relationships both inside the organization as well as external to it? I would submit to you your digital collaboration skills, knowledge, and behaviors are gonna absolutely set you apart from others. And I'll give you some examples of that. Last but not least, we see a phenomenal opportunity for co-creation. Said another way, your success and your future won't be created, it'll be co-created. And in this dynamic time, nobody has all the answers. There is no playbook for where we are. So organizations who really see an opportunity, this is more than a partnership, this is more than an alliance, this is more than just how do we do a joint venture with somebody. This is really co-creating something that neither side could have done alone, and yet the joint effort is dramatically stronger and beyond what either side could have done by themselves. So we'll talk more about that. So as again, Preeti was kind enough to mention, several years ago, I wrote my first book called Relationship Economics, and it was really focused on how to become more intentional, how to become more strategic, and how to become more quantifiable in the relationships you choose to invest in. Make no mistake about it, and sociologists tell us an average individual can proactively manage about 100 to 150 relationships. $1 million questions, which ones? And if you can't invest in everybody equally, how will you then prioritize which relationships you're going to invest in? So relationship economics was really a playbook for really your biggest asset, which I believe is your portfolio of relationships. And I talked a lot about diversity of those relationships and the depth and relevance of those. So I combined this soft, nebulous thing we understand to be relationships with economics, which is more black or white or more definitive, if you will, and start to create some discipline, create some structure around those relationship investments. And I talk a lot about how to turn everyday contacts into not just a transaction, but really potential for transformation. So that was relationship economics, and individuals, teams, and organizations who we researched, we interviewed, we found were really phenomenal in setting themselves apart from their competitive peers had this very sustainable method in which they built and nurtured and leveraged, never used, but leveraged their relationships to get things done. And they accelerated time to results, time to action because of those relationships. More recently, book number 10 is called Co-Create, and it's really focused on how do we turn those really strong relationships into opportunities for innovation, into opportunities to really think differently about the evolution of our business, really co-create. And the simplest example I can give you is think of a husband and wife or a couple who come together and have a child. For most of us, what we want for our children is not only the best versions of ourselves, but what I've learned, and many of you with children understand this comment, they don't ever stop being your kids at 10 or 20 or 30, right? So they'll always be your kids, and you always want to invest in them. And your view is not just teaching them something at 7, but teaching them something that they'll remember at 17 and 27. So really that sustained long-term investment and effort and really seeing the long tail results is what co-creation is all about. That's why it's more than just a transaction, more than just an event or a campaign or a partnership. It really is creating a sustained innovation over some period of time. So if you've ever played a dynamic game like soccer or hockey or lacrosse or any of these games where people are constantly moving, this is a really good analogy for the market. And particularly in the last month and a half, how dynamic the market has become. No one, not a single executive I've interviewed, ever thought a market or a lab in Wuhan, China would shut down the global economy. So the key is really thinking about, if you've played these games, most people or if your children play these games, realize that 90% of the game is played when you don't have the ball. So what's really smart is to start developing your, really think about how to anticipate. Where should I be, right? If I don't have the ball, to give my team or my organization the best chance to win. What should I be thinking about? How do I anticipate the next move, the next opportunity? Not just managing the present, but really finding opportunities to invent our future. Finding opportunities to think differently about what we did and how we did it. So in writing Curve Benders and in our research, in our interviews, if you think about changes in organizational structures, right? First, there was a lot of that hierarchy. Then it became the matrix organization. Then it became this idea of satellite organizations. And now we're seeing a lot more of that inverted pyramid where the leaders are actually at the bottom and they say, I work for you. My job is to remove obstacles and help you get more done. And if you think of an organizational direction, right, there's the strategy, organization vertically of work, division of labor, division of what has to get done. And then horizontally, you integrate to really get work done up, down, and across the organization. Well, again, our research is leading to, we're finding a lot of thought around this idea of micro enterprises and micro communities. So focus groups around the customer segment. Think about it this way. A large organization tries to do a lot of things for different size customers, right? You have almost like t-shirt sizes. Customers, you have medium, you have large, you have extra large. So in organization trying to serve all of them, what if there were micro communities that just served the small businesses? They came from small businesses and they understood and anticipated, right, the relationships that those small businesses needed to succeed in this idea of future of work. So Curve Benders is a lot about this intersection of future of work and our strategic relationships. So let's go back to Menti again. Let's go back to Menti. My next question is, how often some of these things on a scale of 1 to 5, you can just move your slider. Are you thinking about navigating the current storm? How often are you thinking about rethinking your business model? How often are you thinking about post-crisis recovery? And then are you thinking about keeping your people employed? Right? So how do we make, in this really difficult time, how do we, right? I want to know what's taking up most of your thought process? What's taking up most of your thinking capacity? Is it, how do we just navigate the current storm? How do we just get through one day at a time? Is it a little more forward thinking of, okay, how do we rethink our business model? How do we, in this post-crisis recovery, what do we look like differently as an, and then candidly, how do we make sure we keep our people employed? So look at that, fascinating. A lot about the post-crisis recovery, some about keeping, rightfully so. So you need to hear this. One of the executives I've spoke with has 1,200 engineers. They had to, change to work from home, right? Number one, they found out that 800 of them were working on desktop computers that were plugged into the corporate network. So they were going to ask them to come in and grab their monitors and their desktop computers, and right. So instead, in 70 hours, 72 hours, they completely wiped all those computers clean, donated them to charity, and spent $5 million US on getting everybody laptops and remote work access. Number two, I spoke to the same executive a couple of weeks ago, and they're at 9 activity. The highest productivity level they were ever able to get in their offices was in the 70s. So he called his chief financial officer and said, why would we ever go back into the office? Because think about it, people are not commuting, right? 60, 90 minutes plus to work. They're working in t-shirt and shorts. They're taking care of their families, particularly the ones with young children during the day, right? And they're taking shift. People are getting very creative, right? Husband and wives. I got the kids for 2 hours from 8 to 10. You do your work, then 10 to 12, you have them, and I'll do my work. And they're taking shifts, and they're creating makeshift home offices. And by the way, they're back online later in the day to get their work done. 90% productivity. So why would we go back to an office? So now, what happens to all that commercial real estate? What happens to all those office spaces? What happens to all those cubes and all those, right? So I think COVID-19 is going to really challenge, it is challenging a lot of our assumptions around work, around environment, around education, right? My children, high schoolers, right, 16 and 18, used to leave the house at 7 a.m., right? They were school by 8, 8:30, and they went all the way through 3 o'clock, and then sports, and right, and then come back home 5, 6 in the afternoon. Now they're online for their classes from 9 to 12. The teachers are sending them the video the night before to watch of the lecture, and they spend 30 minutes in the class discussing questions, challenges, opportunities. So now they go to school 9 to 12. Why would we go back? I'm challenging some of our assumptions. Why would we go back from 7 to 5 if we can be as productive 9 to 12? And by the way, the rest of the time, right? They're reading and they're collaborating with friends and they're working on projects. And by the way, we get to have lunch together as a family. And so there's again this work-life, not balance, but blending that's going on that's really fascinating, right? And you kind of hear more and more of those types of examples. So again, we'll come back to Menti and I'll keep asking those questions. So in a whole lot of global clients, what we're seeing is some fascinating challenges between great ideas, right, and implementation of those ideas, those strategies, those initiatives. Number one, confusing vision and direction, where we're going, how we're going to get there, right? So the vision is brilliant, but it fails if nobody understands where we're going and how we're going to get there. By the way, the best definition of strategy I've ever heard is from A.G. Lafley, the former Procter & Gamble executive, who said, strategy is fundamentally about the best possible choices for the best possible outcomes. Let me say it again. The best possible choices for the best possible outcomes. So are those choices and outcomes consistent, congruent with the results, with the story you're telling? Culture inhibits innovation, right? If the culture doesn't encourage innovation, right, what can? If your culture isn't unafraid of retribution, if people are not encouraged to take intelligent risk, prudent risk, and see that prudent, intelligent risk as an opportunity to learn and grow, how will they ever, right? to change. Make no mistake about it. No one likes to be told to change. None of us do. Change has to come from within. Change, people have to understand that post COVID-19 and these changes we implement now appeal in many ways to our logical self-interest. So how will we be better off because of what we do and how we do it? And they have to begin that change inside them instead of being told what to change and how to do it. We're seeing misaligned initiatives. How often have you seen this, where leaders ask for A, but they measure, they reward, they compensate B? If those initiatives are misaligned, you're going to have projects and initiatives go sideways that, no, I call them zombie projects, right? Nobody understands why they exist. We killed those projects on the last 3 calls, but suddenly they're back and they just don't seem to go away because they're somebody's pet projects, right? Audiences can't understand. You sit there, you be quiet. I've got 178 slides I want to present in the next 30 minutes. It's like, whoa, you lost me at hello. So what's the best way to lose your people? Confuse them. You cannot get by or buy in if you confuse people. And there's a guy named Donald Miller who often says, if you confuse, you lose. So how do we simplify? How do we clarify? How do we distill key initiatives to its core essence so it's simple, easy, fast? And easy to internalize, fast to act on. Unclear on our why. If people who work for more than just money, right, communicate why we exist with that clarity, how we will persevere in these current times with clarity, with succinctness, with focus, with here's why we're doing what we're doing, I think you'll be amazed of the support you'll get, right? So just a reminder for those that may have joined us a little later, we're using if you have questions, please jump in the questions section on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll make sure we pause. And yes, thank you for also including your organization. So Aditya from Siemens says, how did this organization measure productivity? Oh, you're talking about the key projects and progress against those projects. So these guys are rolling out massive digital initiatives. What's fascinating is I talked to one executive who has been trying to upgrade their infrastructure for and it's not just band-aids, but holistically for 6 years. One executive who's been trying to upgrade their entire infrastructure for 6 years. He got approved in 6 days and $30 million US over 18 months to do more. And they're making more progress in 6 weeks than they've have in the past 6 years. So I think for many organizations, what was a luxury, what was on a shelf, what was we'll get to at some point, just became necessity, just became matter of survival, just became, if we can't physically go out to the market, if we can't deliver what we did physically, unless we pivot, unless we really think differently about our value proposition and maneuver, we're going to struggle. And I'll talk more about that and I'll show you more examples, but thank you for asking that. And again, please use the question section in your webinars tool, and I'll pause periodically to make sure we address those. So here's the challenge. I'm convinced ever since we created PowerPoint, we also created death by PowerPoint, right? Again, how often are you seeing just endless slides of let me tell you how great we are and we want to be the employer of choice and let me just and people will nod, yep, and we all leave meetings like I have no idea what we're doing or why are we doing it or what, right? So what if we dispensed with all that and we presented our ideas on one page? What you're looking at was a 44-page PowerPoint that the CEO had sent me on their strategy. arguing for 2 years on a versus the. I was on slide 6. I called the CEO back and I said, John, I think I'm pretty intelligent, but I don't understand where we're going, how we're going to get there, and what is it that you want me to do differently? He said, okay, smart guy, what do you think is the answer? I said, what if it was 1 page? He said, there is no way. Our business is way too complex. These guys, by the way, manufacture elevators and escalators, right? And I said, just humor me. What if it was 1? And we went through several different iterations, and what you're looking at is really a summation of those 44-page PowerPoint. We want to create quality solutions. We want to be a great place to work, and we want to create effective communication. Now, I've never met any organization that says we're going to create awful products, we're going to be an awful place to work, and we don't want to talk to anybody. So I said, don't give me just motherhood and apple pie, give me credibility components in each of those. So if you look at the bottom of the screen in effective communication in the orange slice, middle of it says Internet of Things. This is a few years ago, and ThyssenKrupp had a fascinating technology. It was a controller board that went inside elevators and escalators. It remembered what parts had been exchanged. It remembered how often the system had been serviced. And with a high degree of confidence and using predictive analytics, it could tell you when that elevator or escalator was likely to break down. So they created a whole new service model around preventive maintenance. Let's not just go out and fix things when they break. Let's make sure we're staying on top of that preventive maintenance, almost like the check engine light on our cars and the fact that we change our oil every regular cadence. Same idea. How do we get into predictive maintenance? Because go down to that hospital, or if you remember traveling, we'd go to the airport with our luggage and the escalator's down. What do? We pick up our bags and start running up the stairs, right? It's never fun when these things go down. So that became a crying rally. That became a lighthouse. That became a way to get everybody on the same page. And this is what you need to hear. Our brains process visuals 60,000 times faster than we do text. So if you're still killing your audience with all kinds of text, and here's 10 pages you need to read, or here's 30 slides or 50 slides, that's not helping you, because most people can't remember more than 3 things. And if you want something to be remembered and repeated, it has to be reinforced. It has to be, have to see it. The last report, the research I read, said they have to see it 7 times. 7 times to get it reinforced. That's not being repetitive. That is actually reinforcing those ideas. And ideal if it's multimodality, right? So most of you have heard of Dyson, right? These guys make, Sir James Dyson, they make the vacuum cleaners and those air hand drying machines, if you've seen those. Well, if you think of Dyson, their core competency is really engineering and engineering parts, and in many ways reverse engineering, because they'll take an existing product and they'll take it apart and really think about how to do things differently. So is it any surprise that when this pandemic really started to take off, within 10 days, they designed a new ventilator, they start to flip the switch on their manufacturing efficiency and volume, they began to take orders and start to deliver this brilliantly designed new ventilators to those in need. 10 days. Because our current times cannot wait for you to get, different parts of the organization to schedule conference calls and meetings to eventually agree on, yep, that makes sense, we should move forward. This is about agility. Speed and agility matters more than ever before. And a lot of mature organizations in mature industries have a really difficult time moving with speed. So I want you to hear this. Startups have a saying: if you're not embarrassed by what you put out in the market, you've waited too long. Now, I realize many mature companies can't do that, right? They're not willing to do that. Fine. create a sandbox? Can we create something away from our current organizational structure, our governance, all of our compliance, all of those things as a, not just an innovation center, not just an innovation initiative, but a sandbox to begin to think very differently about what we do and how we do it, right? And you start to see examples of that. So we've embarked on this research called crisis resilience. And I'm interviewing, we've got about 4,000 data points already. And this is just in the last 6 weeks. And I'm asking a lot of questions about how prepared were you really? Who owned it, right? How quickly are you able to pivot or refocus or maneuver? What will your business or facets of your business model look, how will they look differently on the other side of the storm? Most executives I've spoken with genuinely believe there's other side of this, right? We don't know when, but there's other side of this. And you need to hear this. I was on a call with the Global Vaccine Alliance, and the comment was made that even if we had a vaccine today, if we had one today, it's still going to take time to globally deploy it. And most biopharma folks believe vaccines are 12 to 18 months away. So again, if your business is heavily predicated on physical proximity, we're going to have to not go back to the way things were, but think about moving forward differently. Again, very similar here in the US. After the 9/11 terrorist attacks, we learned to do things differently, right? There was the TSA and checkpoints, and you can't take these things on airplanes, and right, the airplane doors were reinforced, and we adapted to new behaviors and new ways of living. So I'm going to show you some examples of what Agile Alignment is creating, but our research in crisis resilience is uncovering some really interesting phenomenon. So let's go back to Menti again. Let's go back to Menti. I have a question of you on Menti. What are the top 3 barriers in your organization to innovation? In your organization, top 3 barriers to innovation. Go ahead and jump in. Jump in with that, and I'm going to change. Oh, no, let's go jump in with that while you do that real quick. So let's, go ahead and jump in. Is it risk avoidance? Is it zero-sum thinking? Is it tradition and culture? Is it leadership? Is it internal systems and structure? Is it success? Right? That could be one of those, right? We've been successful. Why should we do anything differently? Is it your silos in the organization? So look at this. Look at it. Most people are going to internal system structure and decision making, right? Right? You got some silos, you got some risk avoidance, you got zero-sum thinking, right? If we win, somebody's got to lose. Success, I love that, right? Listen, things are going well. Why should we do anything differently? Staffing and recruitment process, yep. Tradition and culture, but look at that. Most folks went over to internal systems and structures and decision making, right? Absolutely. That it causes unnecessary backlogs. It causes, right? Because 75 different people have to approve it. So again, another good story for your example. Marriott International is one of my clients, the hotel hospitality company. I talked to an executive. They have furloughed something like 90% of their headquarters staff, right? And he genuinely believes, if you've heard of zero-based accounting, zero-based costing or budgeting, where instead of just saying our budget was $1 million this year, let's just add 20% to it next year, zero-based budgeting goes back and to zero and says, let's justify kind of everything we're doing. They're actually thinking about zero-based staffing and zero-based human capital models, where we go back and look at what are the key initiatives, what are the critical things that absolutely are mission critical that we need to run our hotel business. What talent, what capabilities do we need to support that? Let's start there. So they're coming back. It will look very different than where they were before. Doesn't mean we're going to get rid of everybody, but it absolutely means the need to reskill, upskill, redeploy, right? Some of their global talent. And we're seeing some of this. One client is moving their executives from Asia to help with Europe. Another one is moving Brazil, that went through some economic downturns, to some parts of Asia, of how do we rebound? So rethinking about your global talent differently goes a long way. So thank you for doing that with Menti. And again, we'll keep coming back. Let me pause a quick second and let's see if there's some questions here. Let's see. Viswa, I represent Brigade Group, who's into real estate and construction. Ours is brick and mortar business. It would be quite difficult to adapt to new ways of business, lesser opportunities to reduce the physical aspects of our business. Requesting repeat. So Viswa, thank you. I'm actually going to show you a specific example from corporate real estate in a second. So hang tight. I will absolutely get to that. This is Sanjay from DHL. How do you see would change post-COVID? Do you think globalization will reduce due to this epidemic? So enjoy. Yes, again, I have an example for delivery and more importantly, integration of delivery into what I call our sacred spaces. So again, thank you for those. Those are great. You're thinking ahead. I want to show you some very specific examples. So thanks for jumping in. Hang tight a second, and I think I'll show you that in a second. So for several years, I've been teaching. You heard I'm an adjunct faculty at Emory University in Atlanta, Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee. I've taught at Koç University in Istanbul. So I'm also a visiting faculty at several universities. And we've been teaching this idea of strategy visualization, an example of the ThyssenKrupp that I showed you. Not just pretty pictures, not just illustrations, but really synthesizing the strategy to its core essence, but really thinking visually. So it's at the intersection of visual thinking and really strategic innovation. That's a really good way to think about it. And this was an opportunity for our creative director, Lynn Wilson, and I. We were in Dubai and we presented at the Knowledge Summit where the Sheikh was there and the royal family came, and really a good opportunity to present some of these ideas. And this is what it looks like. This is an example of our process where we take a team from their current state, really think about a future state, prototype ideas, the sandbox idea I mentioned to you, then launch it. And if you can see, the rollout has a little squiggly because it's never smooth. You're gonna run into what I call headwinds, tailwinds, and then turbulence, right? So as you roll out these ideas and initiatives, you're gonna continuously learn. What's really important at the bottom of the page is really begin with your why, really understand why you're doing this, really understand your audience and who are you trying to engage, what are the outcomes you're after, what story you're going to tell, and then how effectively will you roll this out. So this has been a big part of our work for a number of years. We've done over 100 of these types of global projects. So in doing this, and as again, you heard me say, in 60 some odd, 64 conversations with senior executives, what I figured out very quickly is your strategy in many ways became obsolete when the global economy shut down back in March, right? All your initiatives, all your key, first it was the supply shock, then it became the demand shock. Now it's the massive labor shift. I estimated 30 million workers unemployed in the US alone, right? And it's going to take some time. If nobody's going to those restaurants, what are the bartenders and waitresses and what are they doing? And what about the parking attendants? And right, so there's just been a plethora of jobs that have gone away. And my conversations, my belief is I'm not sure they're all coming back, or to what extent they're going to come back, or how quickly they're going to come back. And it's not just my opinion. It's a lot of financial analysts are looking at numbers, and they actually believe we will get back to the global GDP at the end of 2021, so end of next year, where we were this past January. The global GDP, end of next year, where we were this past January. So in many ways, your corporate strategy became obsolete. And I said, there's got to be, in our conversations with these executives, I said, there's got to be a more agile way to think about creating alignment up front, executing, reviewing how things work, and learning from it. Because the organizations that learn quickly and apply that learning quickly to their very next opportunity are the ones that are setting themselves apart from the competitors. So one of my clients, one of these executives, has a daily call at 4:45 p.m. every single day with his immediate direct reports, the CEO, and I think 8 direct reports. And he asks one question. What did we learn today? And they've been doing this every day for 6 weeks. What did we learn today? And his request is, after our 15-minute call, get on with your direct reports and ask them the same question and capture those and apply it the next day. So this idea of learn, apply is getting replaced with try, fail, learn, apply, right? Learn, apply. It's just this much more on the job, much more quickly capturing those learnings, quickly disseminating it, distributing it, and absolutely applying it at the very next chance you get. Learn it this afternoon, apply it tomorrow, right? So what we saw, again, a summary of a lot of my COVID conversations. Number one, as you heard, that executive that's dramatically upgrade the infrastructure is digitized a lot of business models, a lot of things that were paper-based or that had way too many steps or touched way too many human beings. And as such, we don't have time for all those potential errors. How do we digitize it? And it's digitizing of business models. It's also going to dramatically change. COVID-19, we believe, is going to change our physical behaviors, our physical interactions. Think about it. I don't want to touch doorknobs, going back to the commercial real estate. So we're seeing our clients already install a lot of hands-free, right, motion sensors that not just open doors, but open access, not just access, but open all kinds of other things, right? So that contactless, that's another term. If you haven't heard of it, you're going to. The contactless interactions are becoming more prevalent, right? That's an example of our physical distancing. One of my clients is Samsung, and they've just released an app on their watches that alert you if somebody's within 6 feet away, right? Alert you if somebody's within 6 feet away. So Agile portfolio really bridges conceptual to concrete, and it's very focused on delivering stabilized revenues, reskilling and redeploying global talent, and then really identifying growth opportunities, right? So let me just very quickly show you. We start with a briefing, we create these visuals, and we tell a story. That is Agile Alignment. Once I have the team, so my executives were having daily huddles where they had to get everybody on the same page, we're helping them do this visually. Once we have that alignment, let's go roll this out. Let's analyze what's working, what's not, and we make course correction, right? That's Agile execution. Then from those two, let's review. Let's look for patterns. This is about pattern recognition, and you got to do this quickly. Where are the capability gap between the things we know how to do and things we don't know? So labor flex, right? Maneuvering your labor, your talent capabilities is a big part of that. And then how do we optimize? That's not it shouldn't be 15 steps when 5 will do. So how do we really optimize? That's Agile review. When you learn from this entire process, we call that Agile learning. So how do we compress? We don't have 6 months for those insights. How do we get those insights in 6 hours? How do we deploy them in 6 days, right? So compressing those insights to apply it to the very next chance to do this process over again. This is what Agile Alignment, Agile Portfolio is all about. So again, we're learning as we go. We're working on about a dozen or so of these types of projects right now. And let me show you some examples of them. So number one, I talked to an executive where they have 2,000 folks. This is the commercial real estate example. 2,000 people were coming into their building every day. This executive looks out the window and says, I see 5 cars. We have to find ways to let employees feel safe about coming back to work again. So very quickly, they're implementing a health tent, number one, at the entrance to their building, the office park. So if you're sick, even if you have a cold, you're going to go home. If you're healthy, you're going to get to the parking lot. They've eliminated their lobby, and they're replacing their lobby with an airlock entrance and UV lighting, so anybody that comes in gets sanitized as they come in. They're deploying wearables, so wearables that not only measure your core temp, but also your movement throughout the building. They're deploying more robots to clean hallways and restrooms and sanitize on a regular basis. As I mentioned, hands-free, motion sensing, sanitizing desks on a regular basis. And they've moved everybody, their workspace, their dining areas, at least 6 feet away from each other. And then you go back through the airlock as you leave. So this is an example of now they're sharing this with their employees of look what we're doing to make your work environment safe. And this is a way to slowly get people back. He doesn't believe all 2,000 are going to come back or need to come back to their building. There's actually some people that will continue to work from home. But let's say if half of them come back, how do we make sure that environment continues to remain safe moving forward? Next one was I talked to a CEO of a restaurant company. So they have a whole bunch of restaurants. So number one, if there's nobody coming into the restaurants, how do we eliminate the seating? Number two, let's not lay off that staff. How do we reskill them? So really think about changing waiters and waitresses to do logistics and delivery. Nobody's coming to our parking lot, so let's reconfigure the parking lot for drive-through. And this is a high-end restaurant, right? Reimagine our top 10 menu items. Let's make those into meal kits that we can either deliver or that can be picked up. Number five, let's not just use video for marketing, but what if there was a membership where our chefs taught people, including children, how to cook, how to become more self-sufficient, those meal kits, how to actually make those meals. And then six, respond to the market needs. So either extended hours or how do we serve those healthcare heroes with quality meals? And they're piloting this. They have some 30 some odd restaurants. They're piloting this in two. By the way, their business is down by 90%. The restaurant business down by 90%. That's not sustainable. So they're quickly thinking about how do we just pivot our business model, but really come up with new revenue as well. This is for our friend at DHL. We're talking to a company. Most of you have had boxes maybe get delivered to our home. We buy a lot from Amazon, and boxes come to the doorstep. But have you had anybody actually come into your home? Most people say no. When I ask them why not, they don't know where you've been. And that's an example. Our homes, our cars, our place of worship, in many ways, our office is almost like a sacred space, and we're uncomfortable letting other people in. And that's going to be a human psyche that's going to be with us for some time. So number one, you have to protect your workforce. You don't have to go in full hazmat suits, but learn from healthcare. How do we make sure they're protected? Number two, really elevate your disinfection of your infrastructure. So really going through and saying, how do we make sure that we elevate the way we think about that? The same wearable technology for your staff. Instead of surveys, maybe what if there were Zoom calls before and after the appointment? So Sanjay, our people are going to be wearing suits. Don't be alarmed. They're going to be in your home for 15 minutes, and they're going to set up this furniture or service your air conditioning system, and they'll be gone. By the way, is anybody feeling under the weather or at your home? So really on both sides, having a pre and post visit session. How was your experience? What could we have done differently? And then number five, sharing those learnings broadly. These are just some examples of what people can do if they want to come into that sacred space that we hold dear, like our homes, our cars, our place of worship, our offices. So those are just some three examples of how we're working with clients to quickly get everybody on the same page. Let's go back to Menti again real quick. Let's go back to Menti. I have my next question. I want you to think about your evolutionary work environment. And specifically, I'm asking questions here on percentages. What percentage of your organizational structure is fully automated today that it doesn't need or it's minimized human touches to that process? So organization number one. Number two, what percentage of your talent is digitally curious or digitally competent today, this isn't about can they send emails. This is about how well do they understand AI? How well can they use digital tools? And the last one is what percentage of your output, your work, is digitally collaborated? Again, I'm not talking about the basic stuff like emails. I'm talking about digital whiteboards or digital collaboration of that work, of that end result. So just use your lever and move that across. So what percentage of your organization is fully automated? What percentage of your talent is digitally conscious and curious and competent? What percentage of your output is digitally collaborated? On a scale, yeah, look at that. So it looks like really good digital collaboration, pretty decent digitally curious talent. There's opportunities to automate more of our organizational structure, right? So it's important to mention, I'm not talking about technology replacing that talent. Today, what we're seeing is talent and human workers are complementing their skills with technology. There's a shift that we're starting to see where now technology is complemented by that human interaction. But in that digitalization of business, you're going to need a very different mindset, more curiosity, more competency in how to, and again, I'll show you some examples in a second. How do we create more of our outcome through digital collaboration, right? Which is where I want to go next. So go ahead and keep, for those of you who are still voting, let's go ahead and keep doing that. Vineet, hospitality business is going to take a long time before getting back to normal. Absolutely, with travel restrictions expected to ease cautiously. Occupancies are not going to go beyond single digits. Yeah. What should be our approach to augment our income through alternative sources, at least to be able to meet our fixed income, including payroll? Vineet from Brigade Group in Bangalore, thank you. I agree. I didn't like sleeping in those hotel beds, with other people having, slept in them before all this. Now, the idea, I think, makes most people cringe. So I think you're going to have to educate your consumers on what you're doing very differently in terms of sanitation, in terms of really elevating their safety, their health. I'm not sure congregating in a lobby area is a good idea. Using more of the digital key, right? So really educating people. If you can check in and use the digital key from your smartphone, so maybe we don't even need a front desk anymore, right? Again, rethinking about some of those things. Housekeeping. Listen, I'm here for 3 days. I don't need anything other than maybe fresh towels, but I certainly don't want you in my room. It can wait. I can wait till I can hang my towels up and I can make up my own bed while I'm here, clean my room completely after I leave. So that may have to shift. In terms of what to do in the short term, again, that's going to be a struggle. I've got several hospitality clients, sorry I don't have a better answer for you, that have shut down their hotels because they can't meet those minimal fixed incomes, right? So I think the first step is we got to get comfortable people flying again. And the airline industry, and Delta Airlines, one of my clients, they have some work to do. Again, I didn't like the middle seats to begin with. So, really sanitizing, really creating different set of behaviors so people feel comfortable flying again. Once we do that, I think that will have a ripple effect on hospitality and hotels. But again, our family had all kinds of travel plans this summer, and we've put all those on hold or we've postponed them just because, again, human psyche, I'm uncomfortable getting on a plane right now until I feel better about, what protective measures they're taking, we can take to make that as safe as possible. Again, you're right, it will ease up, but I think it's going to be a little bit of time. Question is graded 1 to 5, not by percentage. Yeah, so 0 is a 1, 5 is 100%. So if you can think about it that way, that's another good way you can answer this. But thank you for that, Gupta. Thank you. All right, so moving us all along. So I like this cartoon. Digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon. Here comes COVID-19 as a wrecking ball, right? If that was your mindset, I think COVID-19 changed that tremendously. Again, I saw a meme recently. Who's been most instrumental in your digital transformation? The CEO, the chief technology officer, or COVID-19, right? So I think it's really brought a accelerated pace to thinking differently. Back in the good old days of January 2020, we used to do these workshops. And we did these co-create workshops where we got people together in a room, and it was really interactive, and we had this co-create canvas that they went through. And guess what? Now we're doing all of that through these digital whiteboards. And now we're engaging people through more of these webcams, and we're going back to some ways the basics, and we're using breakout rooms, and we're using and technology in some ways is kludgy right now, right? But it will improve. It will continue to get better, and we're continuing to see some fascinating opportunities. So we've actually have researched 75 different collaborative tools from productivity and workspace to collaborative design, collaborative software development, virtual office. This is by CB Insights, and this was a really good impetus for us, but it's in our blog, and I'll share the link to it. But this was a really good exercise for us to look into a lot of really fascinating digital collaboration opportunities amidst this current time. I also had a strategy visualization course that we were all set to deliver in person, and this is, again, as of a couple weeks ago. Well, guess what? We had to do it all not only digitally, but we went through digital etiquette. I wrote a blog post about before, during, and after every digital interaction. What do you need to think about differently? We created these sessions called Coffee and Questions and After Hours Cocktails and Questions. We created learning sprints. Nobody's going to want to sit and go through 2 days of content looking at their video. So we created these 30 to 45-minute learning sprints with a definitive, and again, we used virtual breakout rooms, but definitive times for people to take breaks and get up and stretch and get away from the video and digital and come back re-energized to what we're doing. And you have to take in the humanity of it, right? So middle of class, guess what? The kids run in. So you would be tone deaf if you completely ignore that, right? What we do for a living isn't just who we are. There's a whole different parts of our lives that when we used to come in the office, you may have not known a whole lot about. But now that our work life has gotten blended, it's important to recognize. So we recognized the kids and we said hello, and it was a lovely just moment integrated. In the past, we might have gotten aggravated. Can't you keep the dogs or the pets or the kids out of the meet? This wasn't an issue in the past, but now we've had to adapt to their whole life. And I got to tell you, in some ways, it's incredibly refreshing. I've got one CEO that I'm coaching. I've only seen John in a suit. Every time I go meet him, he's always in a suit. He's in the financial services, so it's very buttoned down. It's very well dressed. When this whole thing started, of course, we took our coaching virtually, and he's comfortable. And in one of our sessions, his dog jumped in his lap, and one of his teenagers came in. I was like, this is really fascinating. It's cool to see the more holistic you, not just the buttoned down office version of you. So this is the humanity part of what's happening, and it's really, really fascinating. And again, we're creating digital whiteboards, and all the things we used to do in our physical workspace, we're now doing it digitally. And again, the technology is getting better, it's getting faster, it's getting much more comfortable. The challenge to innovation continues to be, in some ways, political turf wars, right? And lack of alignment, as I mentioned earlier. Cultural issues. If your mindset in this current time is, well, that's the way we've always done it, make no mistake about it, the challenge is going to continue to be you being in many ways left behind, you really struggling in adapting to these changing needs, inability to act on critical signals. COVID-19 is a critical signal for you to think about differently. Lack of budgets, I've never believed that's a financial issue. I've always believed budgets are a priority issue, right? It's reallocation of what's the best places for us to invest, and cutting back on talent development, capability building, business model innovation, I believe is the wrong thing to do. Lack of strategy or vision. So let's go back to Menti real quick. Let's go back to Menti. I have a very serious question. I have a very serious question I'll ask you right now. Are you having fun? Because if you're not having fun, it's over between us. I'm leaving. It's so are you having fun? So if this is useful, good. So keep voting on that one. Thank you for that. Inner Brand had a fascinating look between 2001 and 2019 in terms of the 100 best global brands. And again, this was before COVID-19, so I want you to look at a couple of things. Abundance of choice. Have you been to your grocery store lately? Any guesses of how many different flavors of toothpaste are on the shelf? Any guesses on how many different flavors of whitening toothpaste are on our shelves? Yeah, my wife recently sent me out 37 flavors of toothpaste, 12 different versions of whitening. There's no shortage of choice. We all have an abundance of choice. What happens with a lot of choice is it erodes loyalty. You go, when we used to travel, somebody brought up hotels. At that same intersection, there are 4, 5, 6, 8 different hotel brands, right? That erodes loyalty. Forget its speed of innovation. How about speed of adoption? How quickly can you download something and quickly learn how to use it these days, right? So adoption has taken off, and a massive shift of frame of reference. So when you bring a lot of competition to market, when you bring a lot of capital and capability, what happens is people's expectations are moving faster than a lot of businesses. And that is absolutely true right now. There are certain industries, make no mistake about it, that are struggling. Travel, tourism, conferences, events, any of theaters, bowling alleys. Are you kidding me? I thought there were petri dishes before this whole thing happened. So a lot of those physical proximity businesses are going to continue to struggle. And again, as mentioned in the comments, it's going to be some slow uptick. Other industries are absolutely doing really well. Again, technology infrastructure, serving up basic needs, delivery, right? Convenience, all of those are opportunities to pivot. Grubhub is a food delivery system here in the US. They just ordered 250,000 tablets for and they're hiring. Amazon hiring, right? There's companies that are hiring that are doing well. So we see this as an opportunity to reimagine and reinvent, and that's where co-creation comes in. 4 specific areas. Number 1 is competition. Rethinking about that customer value, rethinking about the membership, rethinking about few unique really capabilities. Tech enabled, really how do we digitally enable a bigger part of our business? How do we create self-service? How do we create opportunities to reach them where they are instead of asking them to come to us? Diversity, the right mix of talent, global bench. I mentioned earlier cognitive diversity. You need people who think very differently than you do. Last but not least, partnerships. How do we leverage tech to exceed expectations? How do we create unlikely alliances? How do we execute really successful partnerships? By the way, if you look at that image on the left, if you notice, it's not perfect, right? The parts don't fit quite well. This isn't about being perfect. This is about move. This is about get out of the gate. This is about test, get out there and try and test new ideas and new initiatives, because that's how you're going to learn. And again, if you apply that learning to the very next opportunity, that's how you get better at iteration. So unlike assembly lines where we know what to do and how to do it, unlike heart surgery where we've done it before and again, we know how to do it, launching a rocket, again, there's a series of tests and experiments and we've done it before, we know how to do it. Tech, innovation, we can ask a lot of great questions. Raising a child, not necessarily difficult, just complex. And we think of co-creation as not really hard, it's just complex. There's no one right way to do it. There's multiple causes and effects. There's multiple opportunities to look at the landscape and say, where's that faint signal? How do I leverage relationships to better understand what's happening? How do we quickly, I cannot reiterate, speed and agility, quickly model something that we get out and test. And if you think about a venture capital or a private equity model where they'll make 10 bets on something and each of them have to go through a quality gate and 10 become 8 and become 5 and become 3, and we invest in that 1. So in co-creation, you have to think about the idea of killing 999 flowers so you can have that one beautiful tree. If you fall in love with some of your best ideas, you're going to get emotionally attached. And if you get emotionally attached to an idea, you're going to have blinders on and not likely to see the challenges that that one idea really has in bridging the conceptual to the concrete, right? So what we're doing is this idea of a 12-week innovation sprint. So like any other sprint, the team members are critical. So we're taking 3 to 5 people away from, again, the corporate structure, the corporate governance, and we're going through a series of business model innovation. We're going through a series of take a piece of our business and let's think about it very differently with a white page. We're doing all this visually and we create iterations of it over some period of time. And by the way, we're doing all this virtually. So we start with a kickoff. We identify this idea of faint signal scouting. What are those customer operation membership models and opportunities? We create different value propositions. We get out there and field test it. And again, all virtually. Hey, if we had this, if this is what it looked like, would you use it? Would it be of value? Then we'll come back and co-create and really create a portfolio model to all these ideas. So end of 12 weeks, not only do you have created an environment of experimentation and testing, but you have 3 to 5 people, a small team that's really focused on doing this, learning how to do it and repeat this over and over again. And we're having a lot of success in a stair-step approach. So everybody talks about disruption. It's cool to talk about innovation. I would submit it starts with iteration, which is how do we do the same thing better? You do enough iteration, it leads to innovation, which is how do we do new things? You dabble enough in innovation, it leads to disruption, which is how do we do new things that really make the old obsolete? How do we do new things that it isn't going back to? A lot of people say, I want to go back to the way things were. No, I would submit this is an opportunity to move forward with a different mindset, different thinking about how we used to do things, right? So I think I've got 2 final questions in Menti, Give me one takeaway. I've shared a lot of ideas with you around agile alignment, digital collaboration, and co-creation. Just type in one takeaway for me of what you've taken away from this session together. And again, I realize it's Friday night in India and even later in Singapore and other parts of the world. So thanks for sticking around with us. But co-creation, thank you. So, and I realize there's a lot of questions. I will absolutely take some of those. I'm also happy to stay afterwards a little bit. So Major Rajesh wants to know, what are your thoughts on effective of social isolation resulting from work from home ways of working? I just wrote an Inc. article about this. Just because we're physically distant and we're doing digital should not replace the human interaction. You just got to think about human interaction very differently. So I'm having wine and cheese gatherings at my porch, and clients and colleagues and board members were 6 feet apart, but they come over and 1 and 2 at a time. We sit, we visit, we get caught up. We need that human interaction. You just got to think about it very differently. And in smaller settings, smaller one-on-one, one-on-two sessions versus any kind of larger gatherings. Rajesh in a Cardano Hotels group in Dubai, nice to see you. Especially for people with families, what are your thoughts on effective social isolation result for work? Yeah, so Rajesh, really critical to still get people together. We're having a lot more walking meetings. So I don't know about you, if you've been outside, the weather has certainly cleared up. A lot of pollution has gone away because we're not driving, flying as much. So I'm having a lot of walking meetings where you get a chance to walk around a park, and you can't take notes and it's difficult to do presentations, but you can absolutely still meet and discuss and talk about, and I'm taking notes in my car afterwards. Or I'm certainly thinking about some ideas before, but it's forcing us to get back to that one-on-one interaction without the presentations and without PowerPoints and those kinds of things. So we're having a lot of walking meetings. I'm working with several clients that are getting small teams together, again, around a park, around a green space, that are physically distant, but we can sit and really collaborate, right, that way. One client literally had everybody come bring lawn chairs, like beach chairs, to a park, and they sat 6 foot apart, I think with 5-6 people, and they sent me a great picture that they were still physically apart, but they were all collaborating around their ideas, and they came together, they did that, and they left, right? So smaller teams, outdoors, not in spaces. People are not going to want to touch spaces. So creating an environment like that. This is also really difficult for children because they're all used to playing with each other, but it's really also important that we think differently about connecting them. So thank you for everybody who's jumped in with your comments and questions. Sanjoy, in a contactless world, how does consumers' centricity get impacted? You're going to have to dramatically elevate their digital experience. You're going to have to reimagine their digital experience. It's more of this versus stale surveys. I think customer service is going to have to become more visual and more with webcams and really engaging and interacting. If we can't meet in person, we got to find other ways to reconnect digitally. Gupta Boda wants to reshape business and adopt a post-COVID-19. What is a good investment in terms of percentage of current revenues? Gupta, I have clients that are already up to about 20% of their revenues earmarked and being invested in this idea of innovation, sandbox innovation sprints. So we're doing it slow, we're doing it small, but one client, we have 8 different innovation teams right now who've taken different parts of their business and they're moving ahead with these 12-week sprints. So you need to start thinking differently about R&D and innovation, not as a department, not as a function, but as really integrated into the business model moving forward. Let me take, I think that's those there. Again, please keep the questions coming. These are some great takeaways. Reimagining workplace, iteration leads to innovation, leads to disruption, absolutely. Everyday learning at all levels. Agility is more than important. I think it's really critical to our success. And of course, we're living in an emoji world. So give us an emoji that represents how you feel about the session. 1, I didn't get much value. 2, I got distracted. 3, all good. 4, really enjoyed it. 5, I can put this to use. So if you could just pick an emoji, that would be great. And I'll leave that up. So thank you, very kind. A lot of good comments there with the emojis. So if you want to engage me virtually for your company, please contact Gautam. Our management team in India is Right Selection. Great. By the way, I've lost some weight since Gautam and I took that picture. I want to make sure you understand. I'm a lot slimmer now, been in shape. So I'll be happy to schedule a conversation, understand more about your environment and how we may be able to help you and your team. We're also doing a lot more virtually, a lot more digitally, as I mentioned, from 2-day workshops to executive briefing sessions. So please get in touch with Gautam. We're happy to talk to you about how we might be able to help. I want to leave you with this quote and give you a second to read it. Gary Hamel is by far one of my favorite thinkers. And look at his comment. Strategy is about viewing the world in new ways and
reference. Of course, this is not for circulation, but definitely thank you for being here and making full use and having the interactive questions. So thank you so much, David. And thank you, everyone. We will be connecting soon with you for our next session next Friday. And loving connecting virtually and thinking differently, as David said. And thank you again, Gautam, for making this happen and getting David with us. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Gautam.
Thank you, Preeti. Thank you, David. Pleasure.
Thank you.